Hello, this is Don Victor, author of Drawn to Win, host of the podcast Drawn to Win, the director of the Academy of Composition, and the creator of the Core 80 Experience, also known as the See and Grow Rich in Art video course, which you can find out more information at core80.com. This is the Drawn to Win podcast, where I have the incredible privilege to draw artists from around the world into fun and meaningful conversations around art and life, and yes, maybe even a little food. You can hear us each week on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and YouTube. So make sure you subscribe so you always have a seat among friends. Let's get into the show. Corrina, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
What are you working on?
Well, I'm really excited about what I'm working on right now, even though it's going to take me years to accomplish.
Oh, okay.
But I'm working on a series that's a little different from what I normally work on. So my normal artwork is I'm a colored pencil artist and I do wildlife. And my normal artwork is very vibrant in color, very detailed, very realistic, but also just very, very vibrant. And I'm still doing that, but in between those, I'm doing this other series right now that is all about species that are endangered or threatened or considered vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And it's a different kind of series because they're a lot bigger than I normally do, which is part of why it's going to take me so long. And they're in black and white. Oh. And so normally, it's a little different than what I normally do. I feel like with these ones, I really want to get an emotional attachment from the audience. Mm-hmm. And I just feel like stripping it of color, having it be that stark black and white with so much contrast and still all that same detail is just going to be really intriguing. And I'm leaving the backgrounds almost completely blank and white, both to bring attention to, those animals, that subject matter, and because it represents the fact that their habitat and environments are being destroyed, and pretty soon they won't have any. So
that's interesting.
And they're definitely bigger than they're normally I work because colored pencil, the way that I do it with so many layers and so much color, takes a really long time.
Sure.
So normally I work in size like 8 by 10 inches to 16 by 20 inches. Mm-hmm. These are 16 by 20 to more like 24 by 30. So they're getting a little bigger, and I have to get all my custom matting and framing and and stuff done for them. Wow. But they're really, really, the ones I've done so far, I've done 2 so far, and I'm working on my 3rd. The first 2 were an African elephant and then a black rhino. And the one I'm working on right now is a lion cub. And so far, they're really, really striking. And they're striking at people's hearts, kind of. Like, they've been very, very, very popular pieces. I did the first one, the African elephant, a couple years ago, not really thinking about it as a series, just kind of playing around with the idea of doing a black and white piece for, an animal that is kind of grayish in color and leaving the background blank. And I donate some of the proceeds from each of these pieces to an organization that helps those specific species. Mm-hmm. So for that one, it was the 96 Elephants campaign by the Wildlife Conservation Society. And it's specifically towards African elephants and helping them, come back from poaching and things like that for their ivory and everything. And then the black rhino is the World Wildlife Fund because they created the first rhino sanctuary in Kenya.
Oh, wow.
And so each one has like a specific piece that it goes towards, and so for each one, any sort of print that I sell of it or anything like that, it's still going to have a percentage going towards that cause. Awesome. And I'm very wrapped up in it. I'm very excited about them because they're different, they're unique, and they just stand out, especially when they're matted and framed. Mm-hmm. And they're so big and just like, they're striking. And I just love that I can help with wildlife at the same time, you know?
Yeah, you're kind of like a wildlife freak. You love these
Yeah, a little
animals.
bit.
That's awesome.
I really do love animals.
As an
It's
artist, we have the great privilege of owning our freakiness. So whatever it
it's true.
is.
We can be weird, and people don't really, you know. I was a part of a group a while back, and we were doing some sort of exercise, like leadership exercise, where we had to walk around the room in random directions. Everyone started going in one direction. I was the only person to go in the other direction. And everyone looked at me and were like, well, you're an artist. That makes sense.
Exactly. It's our get out of normality card. Um, but like, how did your love for animals come about?
I don't really know. I mean, I've always loved animals ever since I was a kid. And I'm a cat lover. I grew up with cats.
Hmm.
And when I was really young, I used to just pretend like I was a cat. And just kind of, you know, I've always had some sort of connection with animals. And it really started flourishing. But I just find them really majestic, beautiful, you know, creatures. And it goes from, you know, tigers to insects to, you know, dogs to lizards. Like, it doesn't really matter. I just love animals.
That's
And
awesome.
it's just kind of a fun thing. And I've been chronically ill for the last 9.5 years, and I was bedridden for about 6.5 of those years. And during that time, looking at pictures of animals, you know, trying to get out of the room that I was in mentally was a huge thing for me. So then starting to draw animals, it kind of helped me escape to a nature that I couldn't get to physically. You know, things that I couldn't see with my own eyes in real life, I could go there by drawing them. And I always draw their eyes first, so that for two reasons. One, so that I could see like their personality coming out already just in the eyes. And two, because I really like doing eyes, and if I do eyes really well, it makes me want to finish the piece because I have a lot of trouble finishing a piece. So I get a little ADD when I get to about 50% of the way through, and that is just, if I like that part, which is usually the part I like the most, I'm like, well, I have to finish, otherwise no one's going to see it.
Well, that's cool. That's a good system.
Yeah, I learned that very quickly.
Now, before you got ill, did you draw before then, or?
I had never really drawn anything before 2010, 2 years after I became sick. It was one of those things that kind of came out of the blue. I became really sick in 2008, and I was 18 years old.
Wow.
And I was in my first semester of college. I was there for biology and anthropology is what I was thinking I was going to double major in. In high school, you know, I was a 3-sport athlete. I played field hockey, tennis, and basketball.
Wow.
And I was a 4.0 student. You know, like, I was a very, very productive, active, driven person. Yeah, type A personality. And then I became so sick that I could barely move. Like, walking to the bathroom sometimes was difficult. Trying to get upstairs was almost impossible. Sometimes I would stop halfway. And because out there I had an apartment that was up like 15 stairs. Thankfully, no one else. It was a private staircase. And I would just sit there trying to get to the top of the stairs after trying to go to class. And I had a migraine that wouldn't go away. So 24/7, not just a headache, but a migraine with the eye pain and nausea and all of that for, you know, almost 7 years.
Wow.
So, and I could barely sleep. So I was shaking and hallucinating, and my anxiety went through the roof. I was having panic attacks, even though I was stuck at home. You know, after that first semester, my parents had to come collect me from college and just put me in a darkened room with heavy-duty carpenter sunglasses and earplugs, and I couldn't even really watch TV because it was too bright and loud. You know, my brain just couldn't handle it. I couldn't read. So I couldn't really do anything other than sit there and be in pain and pet my cat. And so that's kind of how I turned to drawing, was because I was trying to think of anything that I could possibly do. Because everything I'd done before, I couldn't do anymore, which was extraordinarily difficult. And just sitting there in so much pain, unable to sleep even to get away from it. It was just, it's something you wouldn't wish on your worst enemy. It was just one of those really, really terrible things that for a long time I couldn't do anything about because doctors couldn't diagnose me. And so I one day picked up a number 2 pencil and a leftover piece of poster board in my closet from high school and just started kind of sketching in my lap in bed. And I sketched, it wasn't an animal. It was actually a female nude. And I just kind of sketched it and I was like, okay, well, that was interesting, like not really thinking much about it. And I was like, it'd be cooler if it was in color, like I want something bright. Like I just want something colorful, because in here it's all dark and, I don't have any light or color in my life. And so I knew I couldn't do paints because I was in bed, with no energy. So that wasn't going to work. And I knew pastels were going to be too messy. Everything I went through, like the kind of typical art mediums. And then I fell on colored pencil. So I was like, well, I've seen someone do colored pencil before. That was really cool. Really bright colored, more than what I used to do in grade school, maybe I'll give that a try. And I used every single color in the pack to try and figure out what they would do on that big piece of poster board. So the woman's skin was purple with like an orange highlight, her hair was like golden reddish colored. I mean, it wasn't very good, but it was just, it was interesting. And then I put her on a green lily pad with, water all around her. It was just kind of this crazy, crazy drawing. And just to see, how to play around with the colored pencils and if they really could be opaque, like that bright, vibrant color. And I was really shocked that they were, with enough layers. Yeah, I could get a really colorful piece. And then immediately I turned to drawing animals after that.
That's awesome.
But yeah,
it was awesome. You still have the first one?
I do. It's all sorts of ripped up, but my mom has framed it.
That's awesome.
So it's in her house, and my cat has scratched on it. It's been rolled up in a closet. It's been, damaged in a number of ways, but she found it and then framed it. So we have every single piece that I've ever drawn.
That's awesome. Well, look at that. So. It's you. Anyways, but that's actually it'd be kind of interesting to go back, because when you were saying that, you put her on this little lily pad and she's in the middle of water.
I know, it's so different from anything else I've ever done.
Yeah. Like, I'd encourage you to go back into that space at some point, because the imagery of that there's a very profoundness to it, and just
and it would be interesting to redo that exactly. Yeah, it was interesting, and I don't show it to a lot of people, but people have seen it. It is, I think, it actually is somewhere on my blog.
Somewhere on your blog.
But
very, very cool. Yeah. Very cool. Yeah, I mean, your work is pretty intense. I mean, it was something I was noticing about it was the color. And so it'll be a very interesting challenge as you go through this black and white stage of work to see how to get as much emotion and expression out of it. And somehow you're saying that the results through the people's reaction is that you've achieved that. And that's cool.
Even more so than the color. Yeah, it's been really interesting. And I keep switching back and forth and doing both, so that I'm still continuing my colored pencil, work and series, and I'm also doing this other series kind of in the background on the side. And I'm actually filming I filmed the African elephant piece. It was one of the first ones I filmed while I did it, and then I created a speed drawing video from it. So that's on my YouTube channel, which has been really popular. So I'm doing that same thing, if it works, with my lion cub drawing. So, it's about halfway done now. and I'm using a different camera because my other one broke. That's why I'm curious. I'm making sure that it's going to work before I say that there's going to be a speed drawing video. But so far it's been great, and it's been really interesting. And like I said, I still kind of do the eyes and stuff early on.
Nice. Now, how's your health now compared to where, like, obviously it's much better than where it was, but like, where are you with that part of your life?
Well, it's kind of interesting. So in 2014, 6 years after getting sick initially, and being mostly bedridden during that time, and really just in extreme pain, and that chronic migraine, and not sleeping more than about 20 minutes to an hour a night, so hallucinating and shaking and all that, I was finally diagnosed. So I have chronic Lyme disease and Bartonella, which is another tick-borne illness. They both came together. I also had 2 types of pneumonia from that tick 6 years, earlier in 2008. And because I'd been sick for so long, the reason I wasn't sleeping was because my adrenal glands were pushing out cortisol, the fight or flight hormone, all the time, because it was just constantly under attack. And my immune system started breaking down, and I ended up having an autoimmune illness called Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is really just my immune system attacking my thyroid. So they found that first and thought, well, if your thyroid's being attacked, that could be causing your extreme fatigue and other things. But it hadn't progressed enough where that would make a lot of sense. And then they went in and started testing more and more for Lyme disease, which we had talked about in year 1, because I had a tick, but I didn't get the bullseye or anything like that. So doctors told me that I was reading too much into it, and that if I didn't get the bullseye and it didn't engorge and it wasn't there for more than 24 hours, then there's no way I could have Lyme. But it turns out that just some people don't react in the same way. Like, my immune system didn't react immediately to the Lyme, so I didn't get sick for 6 months. Wow. After that tick bite. And then I got really sick, once it had progressed. And then, so I was really frustrated just because I had asked people about Lyme disease way, way back in the beginning. And if I'd been diagnosed way back then and started treatment, I would have been healthy, a long time ago. But now I've been on treatment. I'm seeing a specialist once a month, and she's about an hour and a half away from me. And she does both of the tick-borne illnesses, and my adrenal glands are finally starting to get better. But it's been 4 years of treatment. Wow. And I would say I'm at maybe 65% health, 70% health.
Wow.
And that's not, the hardest part is that's not daily. That's like kind of a good day average. Like, there's still days, there was a day earlier this week, Monday, that they have me on treatment, and it changes all the time so that the Lyme doesn't get too accustomed. And so they switch up the treatment, and it drops me down like a rock. Then either with depression or fatigue or headaches or something will come back, some symptom for a little while. And so things like that crop up all the time. And it's really hard to say, yeah, I'm going to go, give this speech over here, and I'll definitely be there, because I never know if a migraine's going to pop up, or, how my energy levels are going to do. I can kind of try to help it by not doing much the couple days before now, to make sure that I try to keep up my energy for whatever day I do have a workshop I'm teaching or a speech I'm giving or something like that. But it's still, I can be like 90% sure that I'll be there. So it makes it difficult to get any momentum or keep things going with my art business, just because, I could have whole weeks or months where I can't draw. So.
Wow.
Yeah. But that's where I am. I'm much better. I'm walking and standing right now as we're talking, which is already a huge improvement over, 6 years ago.
Wow.
And talking and just, I'm not wearing sunglasses or anything like that. I have a chronic headache still, but it's not a migraine. It's not debilitating usually. Sometimes I still get brain fog, the like lack of clarity, but it's not usually more, it doesn't last the way it used to. I'm sleeping better. So things are getting there. Any progress, I'm happy,
Yeah.
From where I've been, I'm just thankful that I'm upright and not in excruciating pain all the time.
Wow.
So,
Yeah, my sister-in-law got Lyme disease, and she was out, and then I met one young lady down in Philadelphia, and she had that as well, and I think she lost about, I think it was about 9 years of her life. And a lot of that time was she was in bed, and what's crazy is like all three of you are probably some of the most energetic sounding people I know. It's like maybe you're just trying to like make up for the lost time or what, I don't know, but
it's true. I have changed a lot since I got sick. I'm a much this is gonna sound weird, but I'm a much happier person now. Even though I struggle with depression and stuff from the medicine, I can like ride that out because I know that it's not really real, And we've been hit with we've just been hit with every curveball life could throw. I've had a lot of family members, extended family members die in my life. I think I know like 38 people or so who have died.
What?
And yeah, by the time I was like 18, I was really, a lot of them were maybe like 30 of them were. So it was thankfully no immediate family, but it was all, still people like grandparents and people that I was really close with, friends, things like that. But anyway, and just, like my fiance in the last couple of years has started jobs that were then, the company was then bought and he was laid off, and things like that. So it's like, and then we're struggling to try and live off my artwork and do things like that. Like it was just, and then cars would break down, and then computers would died, and then cameras died, and then, it's like every little thing that that could go wrong. Cat is sick, and then we're sick, and family members are very sick, and so it's just like, but I'm still somehow managing to keep my like positive energy up a lot better than I ever would have before, which is really interesting. Like it's just, there's certain things about being chronically ill. Once you get past the point of just being really angry at life, and just being so angry and frustrated that your life has been taken away from you, or that's what it feels like, to get to a point where you're like, you know what? I'm actually really grateful for my family and my cats, and my artwork and all of these different things. Man. And like when I was really, really sick, my artwork, like it started when I started drawing. And I think part of that is because, for those 2 years, I was a burden on everybody. Like I didn't have any way to be productive or helpful or have really any sort of existence. And because I was just stuck in bed all the time. And so as pieces started going up on my walls of these animals, that I've drawn, and I progressed very, very quickly. So, I still display some of my earliest pieces and am still proud of them, they're still, I just progressed really quickly. And as I saw them kind of start to slowly multiply and be framed, I could look up every morning, be like, you know what? I at least did that. I'm like at least able to do something. I'm not a completely, I'm not a complete burden. I'm not a complete disaster. I can at least do something. And it's something that people seem to like, which was even better,
Indeed.
Yeah.
It's interesting. A lot of times when people ask the question, what's my purpose in life? I often think one of the better questions maybe what's your function in life? And and it seems like, when you got hit with this illness, that you begin to question because you were a highly functioning person, and all of a sudden
Right.
you're not able to function, and you can't even, it's a challenge to even get to the restroom.
Yeah.
And here you're found something that you can function at a high capacity, within your means, and and then on top of it, it's bringing joy and uplifting other people, and
Right.
so yeah, that's, I mean, as an artist, it's interesting because there's the ability to do it, but uh, it's the effects that it has on other people that make it magical,
Yeah.
and so and I can see that in your work, through the color, through the eyes of the animals. Actually, that was the one thing I was
Yeah.
noticing a lot on. Um, so here's a crazy question for you.
Okay.
Um, you know, Oftentimes we go through horrendous things in our life, and it becomes part of our story, becomes part of our identity.
Right.
And I know you're never supposed to ask a woman how old she is, but since I'm an artist, I'm going to pull my card and ask you, how old are you?
I just turned 28.
Oh my God, you old woman, you.
I know.
Oh,
I'm
good.
so old.
So
But I do kind of feel old actually, because I feel like for a chunk of, for 6.5 years, like I don't really remember some of it. And it was so terrible that I feel like I lost that. So I kind of feel like I'm 24-ish. I'm just gonna, so.
Hey, that's cool. That's cool. That's very, very cool. Um, so you're not even 30 yet. And let's say
Mhm.
you live to be past 90, okay, which isn't really unrealistic nowadays. So that's you still have, like, you could live your whole life two more times.
Yep.
Do you ever wonder if this illness will ever not be part of your story?
I don't think, I mean, it is a big part of my story now. And it's certainly always going to be a part of my story when people say, well, how'd you start drawing? Because it's just so, it is how I started drawing. I mean, it is really the background of that. And I think, I know, I mean, I think that's always going to be part of it. It's been over a third of my life so far, so that, and I don't know when if, I'm going to be healthy at some point. So it could continue to be a little bit of an issue as I go forward. We're hoping that I'll get to a point where I won't be on treatment and I won't be, having to struggle with headaches and random fatigue and all of that. But it could keep going for a number of years. We really have no idea. And there's not enough research and practice, around this disease to really know.
Mm-hmm.
But we're optimistic, and my specialist is optimistic, and we've certainly run into some speed bumps with my genetics kind of working against my treatment and making it so I can't detox very well and things like that. We've run into a bunch of different little snags, along the way, but which have been frustrating, but at least we found out and then can kind of work around them.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I would say, especially if I continue to do artwork, and continue to be a professional artist and do all these things, and especially help, other artists with their art business and things like that, I think it's always going to be a pretty big part of my story. It won't be my whole story. Let's put it that way. It's not who I am. It's just how I became who I am.
Okay. It's your origin story. The way you became.
Yeah, exactly.
Spider-Man. You got, well, not Spider-Man, but.
Well, that's the one I came up with too. I was bitten by a spider.
Is that what you said too?
Well, bitten by a tick. And all of a sudden I could draw.
Hold on, that was brilliant. Hold on, that was good. Then I can draw. That was cool. Lines just came out.
It just did.
Yeah, that's the That's interesting. Um, yeah, it's a strange thing. Those little bastards, those little ticks. I mean, I'm in
Oh
Pennsylvania.
my God,
You're in Vermont, right?
they're deadly. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm in Vermont.
and it's just like we got deer ticks and all kinds of crazy stuff around here, and
They're
you want to go
all
sit
over.
outside and you're terrified. And
I know, and yeah, it's crazy. I was interviewed for a magazine a while back, and the woman was like, "Wow, you have such a connection with nature." I was like, "Yeah, I love nature. I just love being outside and animals and just being out, with fresh air and green trees and stuff." She's like, "Yeah, that's fascinating. When nature is what you know made you so chronically, horribly ill." And I was like, "Oh yeah, that's a good point." But yeah, but it is true. I just love nature, being outside. But when I
that's
can
cool.
be, I mean, but yeah.
So you
So,
were you
but
were
yeah, they're everywhere.
so what are so you went through that oops so you went through that process. You got ill. You drawing, and then finding the color pencils, and uh
Yeah.
kind of was almost like the thing that pulled you out of that darkness.
Right.
Literally. Um, Now, as you were going through that, and you saw the images up on the wall, and you're like, "Wow, this is who I am. I can do this." Um,
Mhm.
what did you do next? Like, how did you go from you know being the I'm sick and this is something that's bringing me relief kind of story to I'm overcoming my sickness, and now I'm gonna go full force and become this thing called the artist and do
Yeah.
it successfully. Like
um.
what?
Well, it took me a really long time to call myself an artist. I'm gonna put
Mhm.
quotes around artist, and a lots of times, people would ask me what would I do or something, and I would say, well, I'm sick and I'm unemployed because I can barely function, let alone do anything else. And so for a long time, that's kind of what I did. And then I would kind of shyly say that I do some artwork. You know, my modesty was kind of, I draw some stuff.
He draws some
And
stuff.
then, yeah, and then as things went on, and I finally learned what was wrong with me, the next year I started calling myself an artist and doing it a little more. And I took a couple different workshops related to the business side of artwork.
Mhm.
The Vermont Arts Council put one on. That was like a 2-day event here in Vermont. That was really nice about, your accounting and making a website and, like stuff like that. And then I took one by Carolyn Edlin at the Art Business Institute. They had one in DC for 2 days. And that was really, really great. It was like the next level of what we had done in Vermont,
Mhm.
And I took that, and she ended up interviewing me after that, which was really great. And we connected, and we're still connected. And it's just once I really started, it was like once I was diagnosed and knew that there might be a light at the end of the tunnel,
Mhm.
and then I might have more energy. And then I started like being able to go for a walk sometimes, and like some of these kind of really progressive, things that I was able to do sometimes at least. I started thinking about it differently and like, okay, this happened for a reason. This has been the silver lining of this terrible, terrible thing, and this misery that I've been in for the last, at that point, it was like 6.5 years, 7 years, and I was like, I'm gonna go for it. Like I'm going to get my business cards ready and get my website ready and, go just try and do this. And I've been exhibiting some in local cafes and hospitals and some galleries and some of their juried shows and things like that. And then I started pushing it more. And as soon as I got my website up, I contacted my local news station and some newspapers and stuff. And they came to my apartment and did a story on me about my illness and how I started drawing, and it's colored pencil, like, oh my gosh, and all these things. And so I got some good publicity, and then people started knowing my name a little more, and I was a lot more confident saying, yeah, I'm a professional wildlife artist. and this is what I do. And, here's some samples of my artwork. And by the way, it's colored pencil, and it really helps to, like, during my first exhibit thing, well before I took any of those workshops or anything like that, it was just in a cafe in town, and they hung, I think I had 12 pieces on display, and it was pretty much every piece I'd ever done almost, except for that first one. And it was great, and it was really interesting because I'd never done it before. I know I wasn't part of the art society or the art world, so I didn't know what people were going to think. I didn't know, like, how to really frame things properly or, like, label, or, like, I was just a huge learning curve. And I did it, and I was standing, well, I wasn't really standing, I was sitting as someone else was getting me something from the cafe, and I was listening to people talking about my artwork for one of the first times ever, not knowing that I was the artist sitting right there.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of transformative, like, you're listening to people say these really nice things about your artwork, and then they read about the artist sheet or something, and they're like, wow, this is amazing. That's colored pencil? That can't be, and things like that. And you kind of get a different perspective for your own artwork and how to approach people about it and stuff once you actually hear the audience, talking about it.
Yeah.
And then I just started owning it.
I always call that translating you, and people talk about you. I remember my first workshop that I did, and there was this lady there, and I swear she took like 20 pages of notes, right? And and I remember looking at it, and it was freaky because I was, those ideas and those concepts and stuff were me. They were in me for very, very long, and now I was sharing them with people. And here she in little doodles and notes, she was transcribing me on this piece of paper, and it was me translated in note form, right? And it was a very surreal moment to see how other people were receiving your effort in life. And and so I totally I get what you're saying in that sense, that first time,
Yeah, it's fascinating. I still get fascinated by kind of sitting off on the side sometimes before I tell people that I'm the artist. Just listening.
And do you feel like when they're talking about that, like there's like that's not you? Like they're talking
sometimes, I mean, it is surreal sometimes, especially in the beginning where, you're trying to explain how you do your work, and they obviously think you've been doing it for a lot longer than I had, And it was interesting. It was weird. And now I talk about my artwork so much, a lot. And I've, been interviewed a number of times and things like that. So I kind of have some of these things that I know to key in on because people find them really fascinating. It's really interesting when I'm at an exhibit or, a craft show or something where my artwork and I are both there. People are drawn in by my artwork. At first, some of them think it's photographs, and then they're kind of drawn in by my big banner that says colored pencil. So I don't lose anybody by thinking that, it's photograph. And then they're shocked by the detail for colored pencil, and then they typically ask me how I started drawing or if I've been to school for it or anything like that. And I tell them a brief version of my story, and it draws them in even more, and gets them more connected to the artwork. And it's just like there's this different levels of just getting drawn into it. And it's just fascinating to talk to people about it, see their shocked faces with the colored pencil aspect, and then see they're like, oh my gosh, faces, with the story and everything like that. It's really fascinating.
I love the fact that you're able to articulate that. I'm not sure most people can. And the fact that you articulate in a way that it's almost like you have a system in place to actually draw people into your web, oh Spider-Man. Um, like you bring them in from one layer, then another layer, then another layer, and to the point that they're in your world. Um,
Right.
and when you get them to that third level, do you see your cells increase then?
I do, and I see word of mouth increase a lot.
Nice.
So once they get to know, I mean, they're shocked by the colored pencil, and then by that point, they might pick up a card, and be like, yeah, I'm going to go look at this further. And then if they're interested enough to ask, a little bit further, I'll give them kind of a brief version of my story. See if they're really interested or if they're just kind of being polite,
That's nice.
And then if they're really interested, they usually come a little closer and their eye, you can just tell in their eyes and their expression. And then they'll ask more questions and they'll get more, delve more deeply into the story behind it. And it's just, by that point, I'm extremely memorable to them.
Yeah.
We've had a full conversation. They're holding on to my card with both hands, and they're fascinated by the artwork itself, which is always the biggest, thing, because they need to love your artwork if they're going to do anything with it, no matter what your story. But then they take the story and they go to someone else like, did you hear about this girl who was sick? And I mean, she does this crazy colored pencil artwork, and, and it's easier for them to explain it to someone else. And it's just, they get more attached to it. I always talk about how stories really draw people in and really help with any sort of like marketing or just promoting yourself in any way. Stories are really the way I suggest to other artists, that they kind of tap into that to make themselves memorable, no matter what that story is, as long as it's something that they can connect to. And
I agree.
I mean, yeah, and that story is powerful, and it can be really powerful, and it's something that people can take away with them, at least pieces of it, and share with other people, and remember to go back and check your artwork or make a sale so they'll remember it every time they look at it, So, I would say sales and fanship go up.
Same. There's a website out there. Anyone who's looking at this who wants to develop your story, it's called mystorybrand.com. Go there, sign up. It's a free site. There is a paid part of it where the guy Donald Miller, he teaches people how to tell their stories, oftentimes with businesses. So you can, subscribe to his stuff. But in there, he has these great questions that will extract your story. And now at my academy, when I'm training artists, story is the most important part of the art making process. Like, before you draw, paint, color, before you think of anything. One of the things, because we have these big critiquing sessions at the Academy online, and the number one question we ask, probably 20 times, is every decision you make, from the color you pick, the value that you pick, the way it's designed, the layout, the subject, all of it comes back to how does each and every element support the story. And what I love about what you're doing is you're doing that. You're building a life based on you're building a story, a life based on this story, and you have different parts to it to grab people into it. And I love the fact that you're very, very aware. So here's a question for you: somebody's listening, and they say, "Well, she has this fantastic, story from, the edge of death back, it's much more of, if you're going to say an archetype, it's like the Phoenix type of archetype, right? Where you went into hell, you died, but you came out with fiery hair laying on a yellow, on a lily pad. But, you came out of this thing. You were a victim of something, and then all of a sudden, in the midst of it, very like the Frida Kahlo type of story, and then you rise out of this thing, and art is the wings that bring you out. How would you encourage somebody who would look at their life and say, well, I don't have that situation?
Right.
How would you
Uh,
encourage them to find their own story?
yeah. I mean, I talk about, so, I do workshops and write books and blogs and stuff about this very topic. And, my next book, the first two chapters, my next book is How to Communicate Effectively for Artists and Creatives,
Hmm.
hopefully coming out later this year. But it's, the first two chapters are about an artist bio and an artist statement. And, I always say that I'm lucky in a sort of horrible kind of way, in that I have this natural story of how I began drawing, and it's just naturally a compelling, I didn't know that it would be, but it's naturally a compelling story.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, lucky in a horrible kind of way. And a lot of people might not have that, but it doesn't, I always tell people it doesn't really matter, because there's something, there's something there about how you decided to become an artist, how you decided to do the specific medium you do. With mine, I chose colored pencils because it wasn't messy
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in bed. It doesn't smudge very much, so my shaky, unexperienced drawing hands could rub all over it without causing too much of a problem. And my shakiness was so much that it helped, like the amount of pressure I had to put down with a pencil is what helped steady my hands in order to get that detail that I really want in my artwork, which I never could have done with a paintbrush,
Mm-hmm.
where I have to just hold it out. So I would say, like, dig into what drives you, what your first piece was, how you started doing all of these things. It's like, when I talk about people doing their artist bio, I always say, like, no one really cares, about stuff that isn't related to artwork when it comes to this specific bio. Like, focus as much as you can on your life related to your art. I was like, nobody really cares if you fell off your bike when you were 5 years old and were stuck in bed for a week, unless that's how you got interested in drawing, by, like, being stuck in bed for a week when you were 5.
Exactly.
And then like, just some random thing. Or, like, if you had an aunt who was always encouraging you to do something with artwork or be creative, it's not as compelling to say, oh, I've been drawing since I was a kid, or I've been drawing since, I was 4, because it's very generic, and a lot of people can say that. Not me,
Mm-hmm.
but a lot of other people can say that. And so if you can kind of dig into exactly why you started when you were 4, who was it that helped you? How did they compel you to even start showing interest in whatever medium you do? How did it all begin, and how does that connect to you now?
Yeah.
Like, what is it that still drives you to do this? Because it's not just because you like it. Like, that may seem sometimes like what it is, but if that were the reason, I wouldn't be doing this as a business. Like, I would not be trying to do this as a professional person if it's just because I like it. And honestly, my favorite part about doing artwork is seeing that finished product. Like, I'm very rare in some respects, because it's not necessarily the process that I get really into,
Mm-hmm.
although sometimes I can. It's really seeing those finished pieces on the wall. I don't know why, but that's what it is seeing them all lined up, seeing that finished piece, seeing those eyes looking back at me from this animal that I just brought to life on a piece of paper, And so whatever it is that, like, drives your work and your passion. I mean, I talk about animals. I talk about my mission for wildlife conservation. You talked about how I'm kind of an animal freak and stuff. Like, absolutely. Animals all the way, like, I connect with the Clean Water Network here. Like, I'm just getting more and more involved in all these things that are a passion to me. And that's really rounding out my experience as an artist, to really have it help me help something that otherwise I don't know how to help.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know how to help wildlife. Like I really, especially being sick and not being able to travel or do a lot like that as much as, I really want to be able to help endangered species. And, this is my way of doing that, both by bringing awareness and by donating some of the proceeds. And sometimes that's the story I tell people,
Yeah.
Sometimes that's the story that they want to hear, not necessarily how I started drawing. They may not really care.
Mm-hmm.
There's a number of different stories depending on who your audience is that can be really compelling as long as it connects to them somehow.
Yeah.
Like people are interested in stories that connect to them.
Someone might say, well, how does drawing help these animals? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, well, you sell some pieces, and then you donate a percentage to a fund that helps these animals, right? So that's one practical way of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
If we go beyond the practical, okay, one of the things that I guess is actually practical too, by you spending your life energy, your time, and your energy and your effort. And really, what's happening is when you're working on that work and you're focused and you're concentrated on those animals and bringing that life out of that paper, you're stimulating a consciousness. And then when you put that and you do it with love and you do it with enthusiasm and intensity, people can feel that. And when you put it out there, then you're stimulating that consciousness. And it's very hard, for things to die out if they're not forgotten. It's
Right.
we don't think about things that then they kind of drift off into nothing. And it's interesting when I hear your story and I see the overarching patterns in it. It's almost like this drive, like, that you have to get it done, because if not, then you've kind of aborted it. You kind of ended it early, right? And and I feel that in your energy, like you are not going to allow yourself to end early, even if a damn tick takes years out of you. Like you're gonna, in this, you had to go through this process, but at some point you made a choice that this wasn't going to end you, right? And it seems that the art helped you through that, cope through that, and
absolutely,
and get that clarity. It, my artist story, and I'm going to throw this example out. And what's interesting is our artist story can be recreated over and over again through our life, through different experiences. So I remember when I was young, my real father was a fighter and he was a boxer, and him and his brother were training me to fight. And so my, like, from a very, very early age, 4 or 5 years old. And then I ended up going into foster care. And I remember I was in this foster home in Easton, Pennsylvania. And we went down to Larry Holmes' training gym. And they asked me to, demo my skills. Now I was probably about 5.5, maybe 6 years old, about 6 years old at the time. And they were blown away. Like, I had some mad skills. Yeah. They said, well, why don't you come back in a couple of years, because you're just too small. We don't have anyone here for you to train with.
Right.
And what I didn't know until years later was that Larry Holmes' trainer, I guess, tried to get in contact with my mother at the time, and the foster care agency, because I guess he wanted to adopt me because there was so much promise and skill that I had as a fighter at this little age, that he wanted to basically, cultivate me to become a champion. So, so later that year, my dad dies. And I just remember, everything changed. Like, I didn't know what I was going to be, do like that.
Right. Yeah.
Be a fighter, And I always say that year I put down the boxing gloves and I picked up a pencil, and then my next year, and so I remember the first day I actually drew a picture that got the praise. It was this. I drew this little biscuit. It was like a little dog that was like in medieval times. It was a cartoon back in the day, and it was called Biscuits. And I drew this character out of it, and everybody was like, "Oh my gosh, that's amazing!" And I was like, "Ooh, that felt
Really?
oh, I'm special."
Yeah.
And so I just kept at it, and like the next year, I won my first award, over 100 awards, and it just became part of my identity. And so I always say, like uh, where my biological father was training me to destroy things with my hands, I always say my heavenly father had a different plan, and he taught me how to create things. And so now I get to pass that on to my own children, so they're all creative,
Right. Yeah.
building and designing and things like that. So, um, ultimately, I always say to people, one of the greatest gifts that life has ever given me was the death of my parents, because it broke chains and ultimately released me and unlocked me into a whole different path that most likely would have never been seen if
Right.
if I was still part of their existence. And uh, but yeah, but and so you can, when looking for your story, a lot of times it's going to come out of you're creating. It may come through something like You or My Story, which is a little more dramatic, but it
Right.
could also come with, hey, I always loved art, but I had a family, and so I had to take care of that family, and for 20 years. And now I'm at a point where I picked it back up because I always knew that's who I was, right? But in those 20 years, I learned all of these amazing things, maybe how to raise children, how to, develop people, how to, whatever it might be like. And now you have
Right.
an opportunity to share those things um, through your art, because there's a lot of people out there who have
Right.
great skills, but they have nothing to say, you know, and um,
Mhm.
and so that's one of the things you want to do with your story, is to figure out what it is that you get to communicate to other people or share with other people, and I think you're a brilliant example of that. So, um,
Thank you.
if people wanted
Yeah.
to look for your book or something real quick, if they wanted to look for your book or check out where they can find one of your workshops, where would they go?
There's a couple places. They can always go to my website, which is just www.corrinathurston.com. So CORRINATHURSTON.com. Or I've also created a Facebook group for artists. It's called Art Business Unlimited. And I throw a bunch of information up there. You can get the link to my book, and then even at the top, I have a whole little thing that you can grab that's about how to research and do a grant proposal, things like that. So lots of stuff, lots of information.
Yeah, guys,
and a bunch of just artists sharing their insight on different things,
awesome. And I'll post a link to that in the show notes. So if you get there, because Corrina has an interesting story where time was basically being stolen from her. And through art, she had the uh, ability to take it back. And for whatever different reasons, there's more than just that, but there's more parts to your life and your personality that has allowed you to really see the art in the business aspect of art,
Yeah.
And I like the way
Yep.
that you talk about it. You see it. You speak of it with very very confidently. You're not shy about it. And so because of that, I encourage anybody to go check you out in terms of, if you want to learn how to write a business proposal, a business plan for your art business, how to do the grants,
Right.
how to promote yourself or sell yourself, things like that. Because there's a lot of people out there who are saying, do this and do that.
Right.
But when you lose that time and you have to now figure out how to collapse it there's a level of intensity that comes with it, and that generates results. And so I think that's one of your greatest strengths, is that your intensity. And so I just encourage anybody who's serious about their business to at least come and check out uh, what resources and guides you can provide for them. Do you coach
I
anybody?
appreciate that.
Do you do any coaching?
I mean, have done, so I've become open to doing some business consulting for people. I haven't done much yet. It's a very recent thing. I am starting to do workshops with the local galleries here in Vermont that are all about, art business and artist development. So it's, the first one was artist statements, how to create an effective artist statement, and business plans and social media for artists and all sorts of things like that. How to get publicity. Like, I really love anything that's free publicity, telling you how to contact those reporters, how to gain the most out of when you get publicity and things like that. So I just, like you said, I have had to do this with very limited amount of energy and time. So my first book, I don't even know if I said the title of it, but it's How to Build Your Art Business with Limited Energy or Time, Limited Time or Energy. And it's that's what it is. It's how to create the right goals, how to make a simple business plan where you're not spending all your time on the business plan and not doing any of the business. Like how to just choose the things that are going to actually push you forward instead of some of that, work that will kind of just keep you sort of gliding where you are in your business. How to be productive in the amount of time you have, like how to limit your distractions so that you can focus when you have the time and energy to focus, things like that. So it's just stuff that I've researched and experienced and picked up along the way. And actually, I never would have written that book if I hadn't gone to that Art Business Institute workshop, because the executive director, Carolyn Edlund, we had done a consult afterwards, and we had hit it off, and she contacted me on my way back home within like 12 hours to see if she could interview me about what I'm doing to help boost my business, how to build my business, considering I had such limited time and energy and this illness that I'm still dealing with, And so we did that interview, and it ended up being one of her most popular blog posts within the top 5, I think, of that year.
Oh, wow.
And she gets a lot, She does both Artsy Shark and the Art Business Institute. And that one, I think, was actually an Artsy Shark. And I've written for her for both now. And it was one of the most popular blog posts she's ever done. And I was blown away. Like, I had no idea there was such a need for people to understand, like, how can I do this with limited time? Whether it's from an illness or, because they work a full-time job, or because they're taking care of their kids, or, whatever it is, most of us have some sort of limit to our energy and our time. And so, it was a huge hit. And that kind of, the next year, I was kind of still playing around with ideas about that. And I'm like, I just need to write some of this down. And I wrote that first book. I planned it all out. And then I wrote it in 5 days, which is insane. It was, and it's not a short, super short book or anything. I mean, it was 8 hours of writing for those 5 days. And it was crazy, and I'm just like, I need to get this out of me. Like, this is obviously working, this is obviously something that I need to write. And then, the fact that I ended up asking people to be my like beta readers. I had a launch team, and they were going gaga over it. And I was like, really? Wow. And so that's kind of how all of the business and stuff sort of side of things sort of started. It's just that I do, like you said, I see the artistic side of the business side, and I like doing it. And I'm someone who, needs to have, like, I can't draw every single day. Like, I need to have a little bit different, something different kind of going on. And so sometimes I'll draw every day for a few weeks, and sometimes I won't draw for a couple weeks, and I'll do mostly business, or writing or something like that. So it just sort of gets all over the place. And I I had to learn how to hone it all in, and make sure that everything I was doing was still pushing me towards that, what I want in the future, like what's my big goal with my art business and things like that. So
that's awesome. Very, very cool. What was going to say? So let me ask you, in your art business, who are there 3 people or businesses or services that you would acknowledge in helping you be you, produce your artwork, get it out there, get connected? Like, who are 3 people, businesses, or services that you would recognize as part of your inner network there?
Yeah, my group.
Your group.
First, yeah, my posse. I would say, number one isn't really like a people. I can do businesses and stuff too, but my family has been like
Indeed.
the most amazing, supportive. I wouldn't be alive today, literally, if it weren't for my mom. And then my family was just so supportive and like, just keep doing this. When I wasn't showing it to anyone else, my artwork, and I was just stuck in a room. Like I had no idea if I was talented or not,
Mm-hmm.
and they kept telling me that I was, and this was something that they really supported and were just pushing forward all the time. So like without them, I don't think I would have kept going. And then, but yeah, there's a bunch of places, and again, all the fans on social media, because that's what I did next. That was my next level of exposure, was let me kind of put a couple of these out there and see what people who don't love me are saying, like people who don't have to be nice to me and say that they like my work, see what they say. And it was all really, really positive. So that kept me going too. But yeah, I would say the Art Business Institute, Carolyn Edlund, really was supportive and like helped me kind of make it more firm that yes, I am an artist. I'm a professional wildlife artist, and this is what I do, and I have good ideas, and I have, a plan in place, even though it's slower because of my illness, doesn't mean that it's any less anything, and that I'm still making a difference and doing really good work, and just have a good plan and stuff. And the gallery nearby is called SEABA, so SEABA. Stands for South End Arts Business Association. Mm-hmm. And it's in Burlington, Vermont. And it's an organization that connects. The South End is considered our like arts district in Burlington. And it's just like a bunch of old warehouses and like cool buildings and just all of these places that were sort of abandoned and now turned into all these different businesses and artistic studios and all different things. And they have a gallery there, and they also like just have this network that they've constructed of artists and businesses, and they get them together, and there's artwork all over. That's and awesome. They do this art hop once a year where they get 35,000 people to come to this wow. one street in over a weekend in September, and it's called the South End Art Hop. And it's amazing. And they have, like 1,000 artists with pieces on display throughout that one long street and some of the streets that go off of it. Mm-hmm. It's amazing. And like all of the businesses, they curate artwork for all of their hallways and lounges and just all of these different areas. And it's just really, really great. So yeah, so they're amazing. And they've hired me to do workshops and stuff, and they're trying to do everything they can to make it free for the artists that come to it, which I think is really great. But yeah, it's just they've been amazing. And then I'm going to be moving soon, okay. About an hour away from where I am now. So my next one is just, I'll be moving to a place called Morrisville in Vermont. And they're just now starting up an art walk and like trying to get more and more artists and creative people and the businesses involved with all the creative people, kind of like the South End in Burlington. And they're trying to get, a monthly art walk and all these different things. So, I'm going to be moving up there next month, I think. And so far, I mean, I've connected with a few people up there, and they're psyched. Like they're just so psyched that I'm going to be moving up, and they've been so supportive. And they've been sharing some of my news on the town of Morristown, the overarching town there, on their Facebook page. And there's a bunch of like breweries and other creative kind of places up there, and they've been sharing things about me and want to have me come to a demo. Rock Art Brewery is up there, and it's just like everyone there so far has been super incredible, and I'm just really excited to go be a part of that. So I would say coming up, that would be someone who's just the whole town.
That's awesome.
Is someone I'm excited to be a part of, and is really pushing and helping, and it's been amazing.
That's beautiful. That's really, really cool. You have to keep us updated so that we can come visit you up there. So this is the last question I'm going to ask you before we sign off here. It's the most important question of all of the stuff that we talked about today. You have to tell us what's something that you love to eat.
So like I said, I am from Vermont.
Mm-hmm.
So anything maple is really the way. Of course, it's sugaring season right now as we're talking. So I can see my neighbor right now walking out to a tree that he's tapped and pouring it into a bucket.
Really? Really?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So there's a sugaring house across the street from where I live right now. And all of our trees are tapped, and he's out there. He's like 78 years old, and he's out there lugging all of the, and we live on a hill, and he's lugging, barrels of sap over to his sugaring shed, and he's there from like 3 a.m. to 10:30 at night. I mean, it's an intense process for him, and neighbors come and help him out and stuff. Anyway,
wow, that's really cool.
We're also really famous for our cheese, our Cabot cheddar cheese especially. And so we love macaroni and cheese, and we decided a little while ago to try and make maple cheddar mac and cheese. And it was the best decision I think I've ever made. It's amazing. It's heavy on the cheddar, and it's heavy-ish on the maple, and we weren't really sure if that was going to be a good mix or not, but now it's one of those things where we're never going back.
That's awesome.
never going back to plain. Every time we make it, it's going to be maple.
And like, is it like maple straight from the tree, or is it like, or is that like, does it have to go through a process too?
It goes through a process. It mostly just gets boiled down. So the sap that comes out of the maple tree is like, I don't know, like the sugar content is only like 1% or something. And so they take it to the sugaring house, and I think it's usually between 40 and 70 gallons of sap boils down into 1 gallon of syrup, depending on the sugar content that year. So it takes a long time to get, but people who do it have these huge, huge vats of sap and syrup that they're making. And it's just, and you have to be there the whole time to keep the heat constant, like a constant level. They even have timers going for when you should put in more wood and stuff for the heater. I mean, it's complicated, but, technically you could do it on a stove. It would just take a really long time. But, they boil it down to a certain level that they know how to tell. And they take it out and bottle it up. And at that point, it's the sweet, syrupy, maple syrup. But it's delicious.
My kids are off from school today, so after this podcast, I was going to take them to lunch, and now I'm thinking I may take them to IHOP and go get some maple syrup on some pancakes now, because
you should be like, "Is this Vermont maple syrup?"
Exactly.
I've heard.
You got me like all craving syrup now.
It's so good. Some people say, you walk into Vermont and you can just like smell the maple syrup.
Wow,
but like we have in maple, we call them creamies. Soft serve is what's called everywhere else. But in Vermont, for some reason, they're called creamies. But yeah, that soft ice cream, and
With the
we
maple
have
in it?
fresh maple like mixed in,
Wow.
and so it's maple ice cream, soft
You can
serve
get it
ice
like
cream.
with nuts on it, like pecans and things.
Yeah, you can get it any way you want, really. And it's fresh Vermont maple syrup that they pour into it. I mean, it's amazing. You can go to any creamy place to do that. And then, if you boil it down further, you can create hard maple candy. We have like hard candies or just like sugar, like powdered sugar you can create out of it. You can create, oh my God, there's a spread that's a maple spread you can put on toast. That stuff is addictive. That's
I have
really
never wanted to go to Vermont until right now. I've never wanted to
it's
go
amazing.
until now.
Come like early summer so that it's nice here. You get all the greenery around you with all the mountains and everything, because right now it's not really very pretty. All the snow is melting and there's no leaves or anything. But in early summer, you'll still have fairly fresh, maple syrup.
Wow.
And all of the creamy places will be open. You'll have even like gas stations, anywhere you go, has a whole rack or something that is dedicated to Vermont maple products.
Wow, that's so
syrup,
cool.
candy,
That's cool.
doesn't matter what kind, but it's there. It's plentiful.
Awesome. That's really, really cool.
Yeah.
Now, with the maple products up there, do you guys have like this phenomenon? Because what I'm imagining is just like with wine, everybody wants to get their artwork on a wine label, right? Is there any type of competitiveness or making like maple labels?
That's funny. I know. I mean, there is a maple label that is like a Vermont kind of maple label of a person with a tapped tree. Like there's a specific looking metal bucket that we have that just hangs on the trees and it collects the sap. And there's an image on those. But for the most part, I've never really seen. Wow. That's a good idea. I've never really seen a lot of.
I think that would
like
be
with maple leaves and.
Yeah, I think that'd be an easy
with our foliage.
To design, like craft maple syrup, right? Because it's all, and then you just like with beer, they do it with the beer where they have all those cool labels.
Definitely. We have a lot of breweries, and that's definitely a thing where there's contests and other things for labels.
Interesting.
But yeah, and some like craft. I have a friend who did some craft cheese labeling and stuff. There's a lot of cows, so. But yeah, there's definitely some stuff. I haven't seen much with the maple.
And then you also have the Ben and Jerry's. Each container is like a wine label.
Yep.
That's awesome.
I'll be moving very close to there.
Oh, really?
Their like headquarters is really close to Morrisville, where I'll be moving, and so I'm going to be driving by their like factory where you can get free samples.
So in 5 years, when we interview you again, you're going to be back in bed.
Really fat.
Exactly. You're back in bed. Why? I put on 429 pounds.
I don't know what happened. It might have been the free ice cream and maple syrup.
Yeah. And mac and cheese, all of it together.
And the mac and cheese, yeah. Because I'll also be going by one of the biggest Cabot cheese places, because it's like there's like a touristy little section not that far from where I'll be going, and it's like all of the Vermont stuff. So it's like maple, cheese, jams, and things like that. There's an apple cider donut place that's so good. And they make them right there with the pressed apples and everything. You literally watch it come out of the thing, and they put it in the bag and give it to you.
What's strange is like
you walk in and you just smell apple.
Wow, that's cool. Okay.
There's a lot of really cool places you should come visit.
I actually will, because you're selling it to me, and yeah. All right, done. I'm going to Vermont sometime.
Well, yeah, it's nice. Plus, we have a huge waterfront with about a half hour away from the places with all of all the food. And on Lake Champlain, it's just this huge, beautiful waterfront in Burlington,
Okay,
and that's where all the arts are.
Now you're not selling me anymore. The art stuff, food, water I could deal with or without. But
the food.
The food, yes, indeed. Corrina,
it's good.
It was a great conversation. I'm going to kick you off this conversation because you have officially made me to the point of painfully hungry now.
I understand.
But no, this was really great, and I'd love to see more of your artwork. And I'd like to send the people who are listening to this to your site and to those other resources that like you have a book on Amazon, things like that. So we'll collect all that and get that for them, so they can just click a button and get there. So
that'd be great.
Hi, I'm Julie Kane, a fine artist living in Brisbane, Australia. I have just been through the Core 80 experience, and wow, what an amazing course. I have learnt so much about how to read and translate the story behind fine art. It's unbelievable. It's been an absolute eye-opener, and I am so glad I took the course. I think it will help me in the long term to improve my skills, make better art, and take my art to the highest level. I've loved every minute. I highly recommend this course to anyone, artist or non-artist, who wants to both appreciate and read art better, but also to produce their own art to the highest compositional standard. It really, really is a huge eye-opener into the art world, and it's a fabulous course. So if you have the chance, please do the course. You won't regret it.
In just 30 days, the Core 80 experience teaches you to decode the intentional design underneath great masterpieces. Through video lessons, assignments, and feedback, you learn to recognize the underlying structures like thrust maps, echoes, and gamuts that give master compositions substance and gravitas. Knowing how master artists and illustrators compose their artwork unlocks your ability to give your artwork more meaning and energy. Enroll today and get a 7-day no-hassle money-back guarantee at core80.com.